The snow didn't fall that Christmas morning. It hunted. Out on the hard white road, a black rancher sat his horse like a man carved from old grief, shoulders stiff, breath smoking, eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. He should have kept riding. Any sane man would have. Then a girl came out of the storm. Apache. Barely more than bone under a thin shawl, hair iced at the ends, hands shaking so bad they couldn't form a proper fist. She didn't beg for food first. She didn't beg for mercy. She reached for the stranger's coat like it was a doorway back to life, and whispered, "Be my husband today. Just today." Before the men in town remembered what they hated. The rancher didn't answer. Not right away. Because the cruel twist wasn't that she needed saving. The twist was that she was using his name as a shield, and the moment he gave it to her, the whole territory would decide he deserved to die for it. So listen close. And before the story turns, tell everyone where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Stay with this tale to the very end, and subscribe for more Western stories like this. Arizona Territory, 1878. The Apache girl's frozen fingers locked around Saul Carter's boot, like she was holding on to life itself. "Please, mister," she whispered through cracked lips. "Just be my husband today. Just today before they come." Saul sat still in the saddle. His horse breathed steam into the cold. Down in town, a church bell was ringing, Christmas bright, like the world hadn't earned it. God help him, he should have kept riding. Rope burns circled her wrists, fresh, red. A bruise darkened one cheek. She wasn't a child, but she was too young to be out here alone, staring up at a stranger like he was her last door. "Your husband," Soul said, voice rough. "You got the wrong man." "I don't have one," she said. "That's why I need you." He followed her gaze toward Stillwater's main street. The bank's brick face, the hitching rail, a deputy half hidden in a gray coat, hand resting near his gun. Watching the girl. A second man stood near the bank window, bigger, quieter, the kind that didn't need a badge because badges did what he wanted. Saul knew him by shape before he knew him by face. Grady Caldwell, the town's smiling money man, the one who bought land cheap when men were hungry and widows were scared. Caldwell's head turned slightly, and Saul felt it like a hand on his neck. Not a greeting, a measurement. Aiyana's fingers tightened on Saul's boot. "They said if I'm not claimed," she breathed, "I'm taken." Claimed, taken. Saul's jaw set. He'd seen men use law like a rope, clean knots, dirty work. He'd watched decent folk swallow it because swallowing was safer than choking on the truth. "Who's coming?" he asked. "The sheriff's man," she said, "and the one who owns him." Her eyes flicked to the bank window where a shadow moved behind the glass, slow and sure. Saul should have turned his horse and let the town keep its sins. He'd done plenty of leaving in his life. Leaving didn't save anybody. It just made the empty bigger. Aiyana swallowed. "I ran last night." He looked at her wrists again and didn't ask from what. He already knew enough. What's your name? Aiyana. The name landed in him like a spark on dry grass. Aiyana, Soul said carefully, if I say what you're asking me to say, it won't be just today. She nodded once. No tears. Just fear packed down into something harder. I know, she whispered, but today is all I got. The bell rang again. Somewhere in town, a door slammed. The deputy shifted, eyes fixed on her like he'd already decided what she was. Aiyana's grip slipped. Pain flashed across her face. She grabbed Soul's pant leg instead. Just say it once, she begged, in front of someone. Then they can't drag me like I'm nothing. Soul's throat burned. He thought of his mother's Christmas prayers. Simple ones. The kind that didn't ask for miracles, just decency. He hadn't felt decent in a long time, but the bell kept ringing anyway, like heaven didn't wait for a man to be ready. He looked back toward the hitching rail. 2 men now, the deputy and Caldwell. Caldwell spoke to someone inside the bank with a tilt of his head, and the shadow behind the glass answered. If Saul rode on, they'd take her. If he stayed, they'd come for him next. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat, not long enough to become a prayer, just long enough to choose. Then he swung down from the saddle. Boots hit snow. Cold bit through leather. He barely felt it. Aiyana flinched, expecting anger. Soul crouched until they were eye to eye. Let go, he said quietly, and stand up. Her fingers trembled, but she obeyed. She rose unsteady, chin lifting like it was the only thing she still owned. Look at them, Soul told her. Not the ground. Aiyana's breath hitched. She nodded. Soul turned toward town with her beside him, walking straight into the sound of that bell. The deputy straightened, already moving, and Soul Carter understood, clear as winter air, that Christmas morning was over and the fight had already started. Saul walked Aiyana straight down Stillwater's main street, like a man escorting trouble to the one place it could be seen. The Christmas bell kept ringing. Every peal felt like a question God wanted answered in public. Folks watched from doorways and windows fogged with breath. Aiyana kept her chin up, eyes level, refusing to look like prey. Torn cloth wrapped her wrists. It didn't hide the rope burns. Don't speak unless you have to, Saul murmured. I know, she said. You speak. He felt Caldwell before he heard him. Well now, Grady Caldwell called, voice warm as whiskey. Christmas brings miracles. Soul didn't stop. Morning, Mr. Caldwell. Caldwell fell into stride beside them. Coat fine, gloves fine. A man dressed like hunger was something that happened to other people. Sheriff's been looking for her, he said, smiling at passers-by. Town's concerned. Aiyana's breath hitched. She didn't flinch. She's with me, Soul said. Caldwell's eyes slid over Saul, slow, counting. That's a mighty interesting claim. Behind Caldwell, Deputy Harlan moved up, hand already near his holster. Soul kept walking, right toward the church. The doors stood open. Warmth spilled out with hymn sound and pine scent. Reverend Jonah was on the steps, greeting folks, calling everyone brother and sister, like words could stitch a town together. Jonah's smile faltered when he saw Aiyana. Then he looked at Sol, and the smile steadied, careful now. "Sol Carter," Jonah said softly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Reverend." Caldwell's hand landed light on Sol's shoulder, friendly as a chain. "Reverend, you might want to know your steps are about to host a little confusion." The deputy cleared his throat, loud enough for the nearest dozen. "That girl's Apache. Sheriff says she's to be taken in for her own safety." "For her safety," Caldwell echoed. Sol turned, slow, and met the deputy's eyes first, then Caldwell's. The town's gaze pressed in like cold iron. A black rancher, an Apache girl, Christmas morning. "Safety," Sol said. "Or property?" Caldwell chuckled. "Watch your tongue, Carter. Folks are trying to be decent today." Sol's voice stayed low. "Decent don't look like grabbing a woman off a street." Aiyana whispered, almost to herself, "If I'm not claimed, I'm taken." Jonah's eyes went to her wrists, to the bruises. Something hard passed across his face. Deputy Harlan reached for Aiyana's arm. Sol stepped between them. One step. That was all it took to change the day. "You touch her," Sol said, "and you'll be touching my wife." Silence hit the steps. Aiyana's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. Shock first, then breath returning. Caldwell's smile froze in place. Jonah blinked. "Your wife?" Sol didn't look away from Caldwell. "That's what I said." Caldwell's voice dropped, sharp now. "You got papers for that?" Sol hated how much his hand shook when he took Aiyana's. He faced the preacher. "Reverend," he said, rough, "say a blessing. Say it where folks can hear." Aiyana's fingers tightened around his, like she understood this wasn't romance. It was shelter made out of one sentence. Jonah looked from Sol's dark knuckles to Aiyana's raw wrists. Then he lifted his chin. "In the Lord's house," Jonah said, clear and steady, "we don't dress cruelty up as law." Caldwell started. "Reverend." "Not today," Jonah cut in. "Not on Christmas." He set a hand over their joined fingers. "Lord," he said, "you see every lie that wears a badge and every theft that hides behind paperwork. Bless these two under your eye. Let no man steal what you are protecting." The words weren't marriage. Not really. But they were witnesses. Deputy Harlan's hand fell away from Aiyana's arm like it had been burned. Caldwell leaned closer, smile returning, colder. "You just bought yourself a problem, Carter." Sol nodded once. "I've been poor a long time. I can afford it." He squeezed Aiyana's hand. "Come on," he said. Behind them, the town began to whisper. Jonah's eyes followed them like a warning. Caldwell didn't move, but Sol felt his promise. New Year's would come with chains. She moved with him, stepping past the threshold, not into romance, but into the only protection Stillwater recognized. A man willing to say out loud, that she belonged with him. Saul didn't look back until Stillwater's church steeple sank behind the ridge and the bell stopped chasing them through the snow. Aiyana rode behind him, rigid on the saddle blanket, hands folded tight. The torn cloth on her wrists couldn't hide the rope burns. "Keep your face down when we pass the Miller place," Saul said. "So they don't see me," she answered. "So they don't count you," he said. "Numbers make men brave." She went quiet. His horse breathed steam. His cabin sat 3 miles west. 1 room, 1 chimney, 1 stubborn door. Smoke rose from it. She climbed off without waiting for help. Steady, refusing a hand if it looked like pity. She scanned the yard, woodpile, water barrel, fence line, rifle by the door, like safety was made of small details. "You got somewhere you can run?" Saul asked. "I been running," Aiyana said. "That ain't what I asked." She nodded toward the scrub behind the barn. "Trees, dry creek. I can vanish there." Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and stale coffee. Aiyana paused at the threshold like it might bite. Saul took off his hat. "Listen," he said. "This is my house. That means rules." Aiyana met his eyes. "I can follow rules." Rule 1. Distance. A man could do decent things without promising what he couldn't keep. "You sleep on the pallet by the stove," he said. "I take the bed." Her head snapped up. "I don't need your bed." "It ain't charity," Saul said, forcing the words gentle. "It's space, for both of us." Aiyana swallowed. "Yes, mister." "Don't call me that." Her eyes narrowed, confused. "What do I call you?" For a second he couldn't answer. Folks called him Carter when they needed a favor. Called him boy when they wanted to hurt him. Nobody asked his name like it mattered. "Soul," he said. "That'll do." She tried it softly, like it weighed something. "Soul." Rule 2. Food first, talk later. He poured water into the kettle and set it on the stove. "You hungry?" "I can wait," she said, automatic. "No." It came out like an order. "Beans and pork. You eat." Aiyana sat on the stool, hands held toward the heat. For the first time her shoulders sagged, as if her bones remembered they were allowed to be tired. While the kettle hissed, she reached into her shawl and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in faded red cloth. She didn't set it down. She kept it close, like a heartbeat. "I need to hide this," she said. Saul's gaze locked on it. Men like Caldwell collected secrets the way other men collected horses. "What is it?" Saul asked before he could stop himself. Aiyana's eyes sharpened, guarded. "Mine." He felt the boundary and respected it. He'd already used one lie to shelter her. He wasn't going to turn it into theft. "Then hide it," Saul said, "wherever you want. I won't ask again." "You swear?" she whispered. Saul stared at the stove flame. "On Christmas," he said, and surprised himself. "On God. I won't ask." Aiyana crossed to the hearth and pried up a floorboard with 2 careful fingers. The bundle disappeared into the dark gap beneath. She set the board back so clean Saul wouldn't have known it moved if he hadn't watched. The kettle began to whistle, high and sharp, like something warning. Saul lowered the heat. His hands weren't trembling, but his breath was off. Aiyana sat again, eyes on the floor, as if she could feel the weight through the wood. He heard a board creak, not from her, but from the porch. Saul's hand drifted toward the rifle by the door. In the silence he found himself whispering, "Lord, I don't know why you put her in my path, only that you did. And I won't hand her back." Outside the wind shifted. A faint murmur drifted from the road. Men's voices that carried when they shouldn't. Saul didn't catch the words. He didn't need to. He looked at Aiyana's wrists, at the sealed floorboard, and felt the truth settle heavy in his chest. Today wasn't over, not even close. Saul had just set the beans back on the stove when the knock came again, measured, polite, like someone was sure the door would open. He waited a heartbeat. Aiyana's eyes lifted, then flicked to the floorboard near the hearth. She didn't move toward it. She just breathed, slow. "Stay behind me," Saul murmured. Aiyana shook her head. "If I hide, they win." Saul opened the door to a gust of cold and two men on the porch. Deputy Harlan stood closest, hat brim crusted with snow. Beside him was a thinner man with ink-stained fingers and a ledger under his arm. "Morning, Carter," Harlan said. His eyes slid past Saul into the cabin. "Heard you brought yourself home a Christmas present." Saul kept his face still. "What do you want?" "Sheriff wants to make sure everything's proper." Harlan stepped forward like he owned the boards. "Town's got concerns." The thin man cleared his throat. "If the young woman is residing here under the name Mrs. Carter, we'll need to record a marriage license." Aiyana stepped into view, chin up, hands folded, calm. "I am his wife," she said. Her English was careful, clean. Harlan's mouth twisted. "You got papers for that, miss?" Saul felt heat rise and forced it down. "Reverend Jonah witnessed our vow." "Vow ain't a document," the clerk said, opening his ledger. "Jonah's word counts," Saul answered. Harlan glanced at Aiyana's wrists. Rope burns shone red where the cloth slipped. His gaze flicked away. "Sheriff's also got orders about Indians inside county lines." Aiyana didn't blink. "I am inside my husband's home." The clerk's pen hovered. "Date of marriage?" Saul said, "This morning." Harlan barked a laugh. "Christmas marriage. That's rich." "Write it," Saul told the clerk. Ink scratched. The sound made Saul's teeth ache. Harlan produced a folded paper from his coat. "Summons," he said. "Sheriff requests your presence this afternoon, 1 o'clock." Saul took it without letting his fingers touch Harlan's. "What for?" Saul asked. "Questions," Harlan said. "About the girl, about your arrangements. Sheriff likes things tidy." The clerk looked up, eyes tired. "If there's no license by year's end, Mr. Carter, the county may consider the union invalid." Saul stared at him. "Year's end is 2 days." "Law don't care about weather," the clerk said softly. Aiyana spoke, voice steady. If my husband goes to town, will you leave us in peace? Harlan's eyes traveled over her like she was a fence line. Peace is earned. Sol stepped forward until the porch rail pressed his legs. You got peace right now because it's Christmas and there's a preacher's blessing on my doorstep. Don't mistake that for fear. Harlan's smile didn't move, but his posture did. 1 o'clock, he repeated. Don't be late. He turned. The clerk followed. At the yard's edge, Harlan paused and glanced back. Oh, he said, casual as a snake. Mr. Caldwell sends his regards. Says he's real pleased you found religion again. Then they were gone, leaving only hoofprints and cold. Sol shut the door and leaned his forehead against the wood for one long breath. He didn't pray out loud. He didn't trust his voice. Aiyana stood behind him, quiet as something ready. They're testing you, she said. They're setting a rope, Sol replied. You're going anyway. It wasn't a question. Sol turned and looked at her wrists, at her steady eyes, at the stove fire fighting winter. Yes, he said, I'm going. Aiyana lifted her chin higher. Then I will go with you. Fear hit him first, then anger, at them, at himself, at a world that made a woman beg for a name to stay alive. No, he said, voice firm. Today, you stay alive. That's the rule in this house. He crossed to the window and watched the road until their tracks disappeared. Then he checked his rifle, counted the rounds, and set it back by the door where his hand could find it blind. If anyone comes, he said, you go to that creek bed and don't stop. Aiyana nodded once. And you? Sol's answer came quiet. I stay tonight. Outside, the wind worried the eaves like it didn't believe in rules at all. Sol rode for town before noon, because men like Caldwell didn't steal with guns first. They stole with paper, and they called it peace. Aiyana stood in his doorway as he tightened the cinch. Shawl pulled close, eyes steady. Creek bed, Sol reminded her. If strangers step on this yard, you run. I know. She hesitated, then asked it anyway. And you? He swallowed the honest answer. He gave her the only one he could keep. I come back. She touched his sleeve once, quick, careful, like she was afraid kindness might cost him. Sol, she said, quiet as prayer. Thank you. He rode out hard, staying low where the bank couldn't watch him. Snow squeaked under hooves. The sky was pale and bruised, Christmas light without warmth. In Stillwater, the bell was quiet now. The hymn sound had turned into work sound. Doors, boots, the scrape of shovels. Sol tied his horse behind the feed store and walked to the sheriff's office on foot, hat brim down. The sheriff's office smelled of wet wool and tobacco. Sheriff Dean Kellen sat behind a desk, coat still on, like a man waiting to be told what to do. Deputy Harlan leaned against the wall, one boot hooked on a chair rung. Grady Caldwell stood by the window, hands clasped, smiling like he belonged in a church pew. Well, Caldwell said, the Christmas husband arrives. Sol didn't sit until Kellen did. You sent for me. Kellen unfolded a sheet of paper. County needs to verify your arrangement, Carter. For order. For safety. Safety, Sol repeated, flat. Harlan snorted. Indians inside county lines bring trouble. She's my wife, Sol said. Caldwell slid a document onto the desk. Then you won't mind signing, just to make it official. Sol read 2 lines and felt his stomach drop. Protective custody. Temporary transfer. Aiyana's name spelled wrong. Wrong on purpose. This ain't marriage, Sol said. It's a snare. Kellen's eyes didn't lift. It's procedure. Procedure is what you call it when you don't want to say robbery, Sol answered. Harlan pushed off the wall. Watch your mouth. Bring Reverend Jonah, Sol said. He witnessed it. Caldwell's smile didn't move. Reverend's busy. Besides, if you're her husband, your word's enough. Sign. Sol looked at the pen like it was a knife. And if I don't? Kellen's voice went low. Then I enforce the county request. I take her in. For her own good. Sol heard the lie wrapped tight in law. He'd heard it before. He leaned forward. You take her, and you'll be carrying her out over my body. Caldwell stepped closer, voice smooth as oil. Why her, Carter? You got a talent for choosing fights you can't win. Sol's eyes drifted to the wall behind Kellen's desk, an evidence board full of old notices and old failures. Pinned there was a strip of braided leather, red beads threaded through it like dried blood. His breath stopped. The room fell away, and an old day rose up sharp. A canyon, wind, gunfire popping off rock, painted riders moving fast. A scream, high, cut short, hands dragged in the dirt, wrists bound, red beads flashing as somebody pulled a girl toward the brush. Sol had been on the ridge, too far to make it his fight, close enough to know what was happening. He'd turned his horse. He'd told himself he couldn't save anyone alone. He'd never forgotten those beads. He'd only buried them. His hands shook. He shoved them into his coat pockets. Kellen saw it. You recognize that? Sol forced his eyes away. Where'd you get it? Caldwell answered, casual and cruel. Clean up after a raid. Indians leave trinkets. Sheriff keeps souvenirs. Sol's voice turned cold. That ain't a trinket. Harlan's hand slid near his holster. You threatening? Sol stood, chair scraping hard. I'm not signing your paper. Caldwell's smile sharpened. Then we do it the other way. Sol walked out without touching his gun, because touching it here would give them what they wanted. On the street, air cut his lungs clean. He mounted fast and rode for his cabin. If Aiyana carried those beads, then this wasn't just Christmas mercy. This was old blood, coming due, and he knew it. Sol drove hope through the drifts like speed could outrun paper. When the cabin came into view, smoke still rose from the chimney. His chest loosened a fraction. Alive. For now. He swung down and crossed the yard fast. The door opened before he knocked. Aiyana stood there, shawl tight, eyes fixed on his face. You went to town, she said. I did. Soul stepped inside and forced himself not to bar the door like a cornered animal. Caldwell was there. Sheriff, too. He laid the summons on the table. The seal looked too clean to be honest. They tried to make me sign, Soul said. Not a marriage license. A custody order dressed up as procedure. Aiyana didn't touch the paper. Her face went still. So they can take me, she said. So they can call it for your safety while they sell you to whoever pays. Soul's voice turned rough. I didn't sign. Aiyana's eyes lifted. Then they will come here. Soul nodded. With badges and neighbors who'd rather believe a lie than look at what they've been doing. Her mouth tightened. Good men looked away when my father died. The words landed hard. Soul stared at her wrists, red rings under cloth, and an old memory rose up sharp as ice. Red beads on a leather braid. A girl dragged through dust. Soul on a ridge close enough to know, far enough to pretend he couldn't help. Aiyana, he said quietly. Those beads you wear. I saw a strip like that pinned up in town. Like a trophy. Something moved across her face. Recognition without surprise. After a raid, she said. Soul forced the truth out. I was there. Aiyana didn't flinch. Did you help? His throat closed. No. For a breath, she looked past him. Then why now? Soul stared at the flame. Because God didn't let me forget. Because you grabbed my boot this morning, and I saw a person, not a problem. And because I can't lose another one and call it the way things are. Aiyana's eyes softened for one heartbeat, then hardened again. They will not take me, she whispered. Not again. A knock struck the door. Slow, confident, like someone who owned time. Soul's hand drifted toward the rifle. Aiyana stepped beside him instead of behind. Soul opened the door. Grady Caldwell stood on the porch, coat fine as Sunday, smile warm as a lie. Two men lingered a pace back, hands empty on purpose. Mr. Carter, Caldwell said, sorry to trouble your Christmas. You ain't sorry, Soul replied. Caldwell's eyes slid to Aiyana. Mrs. Carter. Aiyana lifted her chin. Caldwell. Caldwell produced a folded paper. Sheriff's order. She's to be transported to Cheyenne within 48 hours. New Year's clerk will be present. Proper signatures. Aiyana went very still. 48 hours was a grave with numbers on it. Saul kept his voice even. Processing. Law has its needs, Caldwell said pleasantly. So do I. Soul didn't move. You want her, or you want what she's hiding? Caldwell's smile held. You're sharper than folks say. Aiyana spoke, calm as ice. If you touch me, Reverend Jonah will know what you are. Reverends know plenty, Caldwell said. They preach anyway. He stepped closer. Here's mercy. You sign, you walk away clean. Your taxes stay gentle. Maybe I donate to the church roof fund. Saul stared at him. And her? Caldwell's smile thinned. She goes where she belongs. Sol felt Aiyana's rage like heat beside him. He lifted his hand, steadying, not silencing. "No," he said. "You don't get her. Not today. Not ever." Caldwell sighed like Sol had chosen inconvenience. "Then you're choosing trouble." He turned to leave, then paused at the steps. "I'll give you until sundown," he said softly. "After that, Sheriff Kellen does his duty, and if he won't, I'll find someone who will." Caldwell's boots crunched down into Sol's yard. He glanced back once, teeth showing. "And if you're thinking of running, remember, the law rides faster when it's paid." When he was gone, Sol shut the door and leaned his weight against it. Aiyana's voice came small but steady. "We need proof." Sol looked toward the hearth, toward the hidden board. "We need witnesses." The fire popped like a warning. Caldwell hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come to start the clock. Night came hard, and the cabin felt smaller with every gust. Sol kept the rifle by his knee, and the lamp turned low. Aiyana sat near the stove, hands wrapped around a tin cup gone cold. They'd eaten just enough to stay upright. Hunger was easier than waiting. "He gave us till sundown," Sol said. "After that, he'll come back wearing the law." "Law is a coat," Aiyana said. "He puts it on so the town will help him." Sol watched her face. Another truth pressed at his ribs. He was sheltering a woman whose enemy already knew her name, and Sol didn't even know what he was fighting for. "Aiyana," he said, voice low, "what's in the red cloth?" Her eyes cut to him. "You swore you wouldn't ask." "I did," Sol said, "on God, and I'm not asking for myself. Caldwell ain't hunting you like you're a runaway. He's hunting you like you're a key." The wind whispered along the window. Aiyana breathed once, twice, like she was gripping something sharp. "My father hid it," she said. "He told me if I lived one more day, I must carry it. If I died, it must not fall into their hands." Sol's fingers tightened on the rifle stock. "Your father was the chief." Aiyana's chin lifted. "He was a man who wouldn't sign his name to a lie." She crossed to the hearth and knelt. Her fingers slid under the loose board like it was an old habit learned in fear. She pulled the bundle free, held it to her chest for a heartbeat, eyes closed. Then she set it on the table. When she untied the cloth, Sol expected gold or a gun. Instead, it was paper, a worn ledger bound in leather, receipts stamped with Stillwater's bank seal, a folded map marked in pencil, and a thin packet of signatures, names Sol recognized from town. Sheriff Kellen's name sat among them like a stain. "Jesus," Sol breathed. Aiyana opened the ledger. Columns marched down the page. Ration shipments, ammunition, transport fees, relocation costs. Beside each entry sat Caldwell's initials, paired with the sheriff's signature. "Relocation," Sol said, voice dull. Aiyana's eyes went far away. "They called it that when they pushed families onto wagons and said it was for their own good." Her finger hovered over a line. "Some never arrived." Sol forced himself to keep reading. Dates, routes, payment totals. Notes written like a man recording cattle. 2 girls, healthy, deliver by New Year. Soul's stomach turned. He looked up at Aiyana's wrists, raw under cloth. This is why they'll take you. Aiyana nodded once. My father stole copies. He said if the town ever saw the writing, the town would have to choose. Soul unfolded the map. A red line traced a creek near his land. Next to it, assayer filing, silver. Another note, bank deed, transfer after New Year. The pieces locked together with sick, perfect sense. They're not just stealing people, Soul said. They're stealing land. Aiyana's gaze lifted. They will call it lawful. Soul stared at the pages until the ink blurred. The old part of him wanted to burn the papers, put Aiyana on a horse and ride until God forgot their names. But Christmas had already pulled him off that road. We don't run, Soul said. Aiyana's breath hitched. Then what? We take it where lies can't whisper, Soul answered. We put it on the altar and make them look at it. Aiyana whispered, almost afraid of hope. The church. In front of witnesses, Soul said. Soul's voice lowered. Jonah will listen. Dr. Voss might too. But the rest, they'll spit before they pray. He met Aiyana's eyes. If you hand them this, they'll call you thief and savage. If you keep it, they'll keep killing in silence. Aiyana swallowed. So we choose noise, she said. We choose truth. Soul nodded once, and the fear in him became steel. Outside, far down the road, a horse snorted, then another. The soft jingle of tack carried through the cold like an omen. Aiyana turned toward the sound. He knows, she said. Soul slid the ledger into his coat, then chambered around, slow, quiet. Then he'll come fast. The knock didn't come this time. The porch boards creaked under weight, and a voice carried through the door like it owned the air. Mr. Carter, Caldwell called. Open up. Let's speak like civilized men. Soul kept one hand on the rifle and the other on the latch. Aiyana stood beside the stove, shoulders squared, eyes bright with a fury that had nowhere safe to go. Stay back, Soul murmured. She didn't. She stepped closer instead. He will not speak to you alone, she said. Soul opened the door a crack, chain still on. Caldwell was on the porch with a lantern held low. 2 men waited on the edge of the yard, silhouettes against snow. Not deputies. Not yet. Just muscle, hired by money that called itself respectability. Caldwell smiled. I apologize for the unpleasantness earlier. Christmas ought to be gentle. You ain't here for gentle, Saul said. Caldwell's eyes slid over Saul's shoulder, finding Aiyana in the dim. The smile widened as if he'd been invited in. Mrs. Carter, he said softly, you're looking better already. Aiyana's voice stayed flat. Say what you came to say. Caldwell lifted a folded paper. An offer. One that spares everyone trouble. Soul didn't reach for it. Talk. Caldwell sighed like Saul was difficult on purpose. You're a hard-working man. Folks know that. Land's lien, taxes never are. I can clear your arrears with the bank. I can lower your rate for the next 2 years. Soul's jaw tightened. And you don't do favors. I do investments, Caldwell said. And I invest in stability. Aiyana's hands flexed at her sides. Soul felt heat rise and kept it down. Caldwell continued, voice smooth. All you have to do is hand the girl over, peacefully, and any misunderstanding about marriage papers disappears. Soul's eyes narrowed. She ain't a misunderstanding. Caldwell's smile held. Of course not. She's a complication. Aiyana stepped closer to the door, chin lifted. You want the ledger, she said. For the first time, Caldwell's gaze sharpened. Not fear, interest. I don't know what you mean. You know, Aiyana said. My father wrote your name in his book. Caldwell's mouth stayed smiling, but his eyes turned colder. Your father was a savage who didn't know when to accept the future. Aiyana's breath hissed, and Saul felt her move like she might leap. He blocked her with a shoulder, gentle but firm. Caldwell leaned in closer to the crack of the door. Here's the truth, Carter. You can't keep her. Not in this county. Not in this town. They will come with badges, with warrants, with neighbors who won't help you because helping you costs them. That's how order works. Soul's voice turned low. That ain't order. That's fear. Caldwell's expression softened, practiced. Fear keeps children alive. It keeps widows clothed. It keeps a town from turning into chaos. Tilted his head. Think of her. If you resist, you become the story. A dangerous black rancher holding an Apache woman hostage. There'll be a posse by morning. Men who think they're heroes. Men who won't look twice before they hang you. Soul swallowed. He'd lived under stories like that. Stories that didn't care what was true. Caldwell's voice dropped, almost kind. I can make all of this go away. Right now. You keep your land. Your name stays clean. She goes where she belongs, and the town keeps its peace. Aiyana's eyes burned. Where I belong, she repeated softly. In your ledger. Caldwell ignored her and looked only at Saul. You've already done more than most would. You gave her a day. That was charitable. Saul stood silent. His chest felt tight. Aiyana reached up and did something Saul didn't expect. She slid the thin band Saul had placed on her finger, plain silver, bought long ago and never used, off her hand. She held it between two fingers like it was a question. You wanted a husband for one day, Saul said quietly, remembering her words. Aiyana's gaze didn't leave Caldwell. I wanted a shield, she said. I got one. Then she turned to Saul. Her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat was gratitude and grief and something more dangerous than either. Choice. You don't owe me your life, she said low. You owe the truth. Soul felt the words cut through him clean. The old him wanted permission to run, She wasn't giving it. She was asking him to stand. Caldwell watched, amused. "Touching," he said. "But you're not two lovers in a Christmas story. You're a problem I will solve." Soul's voice came slow. "You're not taking her." Caldwell's smile died, and the warmth fell away. "Then you're choosing to die for her." Aiyana's hand tightened around the ring. "He is choosing to live with himself," she said. Caldwell's eyes flicked to her, then back to Saul. "Sundown was mercy," he said. "This is warning. By morning, Sheriff Kellen will have the papers he needs. And if he doesn't, I'll buy someone who does." He stepped back, lantern swinging. "Sleep light, Carter." Saul watched him walk down into the yard, boots crunching, men following like shadows. Before Caldwell reached the gate, he turned once. "Merry Christmas," he called, voice soft as a knife. Then the darkness took him. Inside, Aiyana set the ring on the table. It clinked once. Small, final. Saul stared at it like it was a bullet. And in his chest, fear turned into something else. Resolve. Saul didn't sleep. He sat by the stove with the rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark window as if he could stare the world into honesty. Aiyana kept to the far wall at first, silent, listening to every creak, every breath of wind. Near midnight, she moved and laid extra wood beside the stove like she was preparing for a long siege. "Go rest," Saul said. Aiyana shook her head. "I rest when the danger is gone." "That might be a long time." "Then I stay awake a long time," she answered. Outside, the wind fell off. That was worse than the wind. Quiet meant riders could hear their own courage. A sound came, soft, deliberate, hoofbeats in snow. Saul lifted one finger. Aiyana's body stilled. The hoofbeats stopped at the fence. Then came a voice Saul didn't recognize. Low, mocking, too confident to be law. "Mr. Carter," the man called. "Open up." Saul didn't answer. Another voice, younger, laughed. "He's in there, Clay. He's just thinking." Clay. The name rang strange and wrong in Saul's chest, like a man who'd been trouble in other towns. The door shook once, not a knock. A test. Saul rose, moving toward the window. He saw 3 shadows near the barn and more at the fence line. Too many. Not deputies. Men who didn't need papers to hurt you. Aiyana whispered, "How many?" Saul counted shapes and the faint orange breath of cigars. 5. Maybe 6. Aiyana's jaw tightened. "Caldwell." "His kind," Saul answered. Firelight flared at the edge of the yard. A torch. Saul's blood ran cold. "They're here to burn." He swung the door open hard and stepped onto the porch with the rifle raised. "That's far enough," he called into the night. The man with the torch stepped forward. Broad-shouldered, grinning, face scarred like it had been introduced to fists and never apologized. "Clay Mercer," he said, tipping his hat like manners made violence holy. Mr. Caldwell sent me a Christmas message. Soul's voice stayed flat. Tell him yourself from the road. Clay chuckled. He said you're being stubborn. Said you need help understanding who owns this county. Soul's rifle stayed steady. You're trespassing. Clay's grin widened. Folks only call it trespass when they can afford to. Behind Clay, one of the men moved left, trying to flank. Saul saw it. Don't, Saul warned. The man stopped, but his smile didn't. Aiyana's voice drifted through the open door, calm as bad weather. Saul. He didn't take his eyes off the yard. Stay back. She didn't obey. He heard her step onto the porch behind him, barefoot, shawl tight, chin lifted like a blade. Clay saw her and laughed, low. Well now. There she is. Aiyana stared at Clay without blinking. You work for Caldwell. I work for money, Clay said. Caldwell's got plenty. Soul's voice turned rough. What you want? Clay lifted the torch a little higher, flame licking the air. You already know. Girl and her little red bundle. Aiyana's fingers curled on the porch rail. You will not touch it. Clay's eyes glittered. Lady, I ain't here to touch. I'm here to take. He flicked his wrist. Two men stepped forward with torches of their own, spreading toward the barn and woodpile. The movement was practiced, like they'd done this in other yards. Soul's finger tightened on the trigger. Aiyana whispered, If you shoot first, they'll call you monster. Soul swallowed hard. If I don't, they'll burn us alive. Clay raised his voice. Carter, last chance. You walk out. You hand over what Mr. Caldwell wants, and we leave you breathin'. You don't. We light the barn, then the roof, and we see who's prayin' loudest. Behind Soul, the stove crackled. Inside, there was nowhere to run except the creek bed. And in the hearth, under one loose board, the truth waited like a heartbeat. Soul made a choice. He didn't fire. He stepped down off the porch, slow, hands visible, rifle lowered but ready. Clay's grin widened. Smart. Soul walked into the yard until the torch heat brushed his face. You want the bundle, Soul said. You come take it. Clay laughed, then nodded at his men. Find it. Two of them rushed the porch, boots thudding. Aiyana moved like a shadow. She slipped inside fast as prayer, and Saul heard the floorboard scrape. For one terrifying second, he thought she was giving it up. Then she came back out with nothing in her hands. Clay's men stomped into the cabin anyway, lanterns swinging, overturning chairs, rifling through blankets. Soul's jaw tightened. Leave her be. Clay stepped closer, voice low. You're learning too slow. He swung the torch toward the barn. Saul raised the rifle. Aiyana's hand snapped up, grabbing Soul's sleeve, hard. No, she hissed. Not like this. Then she did the one thing Saul hadn't expected. She tore the small beaded braid from her own wrist, red beads snapping loose, and flung it into the snow near the fence line. Here, she called. Take what you came for. Every head turned. Clay's eyes locked on the beads like they were blood. In that split second, attention stolen, Aiyana leaned into Saul's ear. "Run, now." Saul's heart slammed. She hadn't offered a surrender. She'd bought them a breath. Saul grabbed her hand, jerked her off the porch, and sprinted toward the creek bed as Clay's shout exploded behind them. "After 'em!" And the first flame hit the barn. Saul didn't stop running until the creek bed swallowed them. Snow knifed his lungs, and firelight chased them through the cottonwoods. Aiyana stumbled once, caught herself, and kept moving like pain was something a person could refuse. Behind them, the barn groaned as flames found dry boards. Clay Mercer's voice rode the wind. "Spread out! He's close!" Hooves hammered. Men fanned wide, not deputies, just hired hunger. They didn't need justice. They needed a story. "Down," Saul breathed. They dropped into the cut of the creek, frozen mud biting through gloves. Saul dragged Aiyana beneath an old bank overhang and covered her with his body. He angled the rifle toward the rim, breath shallow. A torch bobbed above, orange against the blue-white night. A voice laughed. "Smell that. That's your barn burnin', Carter. Merry Christmas." Aiyana's fingers found Saul's sleeve. Not begging, anchoring. Boots slid down into the creek. Close. Lantern light slipped across ice. Saul lifted the rifle. Aiyana pressed her hand over the barrel, firm and silent. Her eyes said, "Not first." Saul's body strained. If he fired, the torchlight would swing, and every gun would pinion this bank. If he didn't, the man might step right on them. Saul held his breath and let the boots pass. The man muttered a curse about that black rancher and the Apache, then moved downstream. The torchlight drifted away. Saul exhaled slow, like he was trying to keep his soul from making noise. Above them, voices called back and forth. Horses snorted. The search circled, then steadied into confidence. A shot cracked from the ridge, then another, then a scream that cut off like a door slammed. Aiyana flinched hard. Saul went still. That wasn't warning fire. That was theater. Hoofbeats thundered away toward town. Clay's voice rose, loud enough for God to hear. "Sheriff, we got blood! Carter shot a deputy!" Saul froze. "Deputy?" Aiyana stared at him, dread spreading. "They brought one to die," she whispered. Saul pictured it. Law used as bait, a bottle planted, a wound placed where the story needed it. In the morning, paper would appear, and the town would get to hate Saul with clean consciences. Black man with a gun. Apache girl in his cabin. Dead deputy. The noose would tie itself. Saul's hands shook once, and he hated himself for it. Not because he was afraid to die. He'd looked death in the eye before. But because he was afraid to become exactly what they said he was. One bad shot in the dark. One body in the snow. And Caldwell would lift his papers and smile. See? Savage. Criminal. It didn't matter that the paper was a lie. A lie with a seal was still a chain. Aiyana leaned close enough that her breath warmed his cheek. "They will say I tricked you," she whispered. "They will say I stole your name." "You needed it," Saul said. That ain't theft. That's survival. And you? Her voice cracked once, then steadied. Why? Are you still here? Soul swallowed. Because it's Christmas, he said, rough. And if God's still listening, then maybe he didn't send you to die at my doorstep. He couldn't prove it, but the thought held him like a hand on his shoulder, keeping him from running again. Aiyana's breath came quick. If they say you killed Law, they won't say, Soul answered. They'll swear. He listened. The riders didn't search anymore. They'd gotten what they came for. A reason. Soul eased his weight off Aiyana. His mind moved fast. Caldwell wanted the girl. Grady wanted the papers. The sheriff wanted quiet. Now the town would want blood. Soul touched Aiyana's wrist. Gentle. We wait. Let the night carry him off. They stayed tucked beneath the bank until the last torchlight vanished and the creek whispered under thin ice. In that dark, Saul found himself speaking to God, not because he felt holy, but because fear had to go somewhere. Lord, he murmured, don't let me fail her. Aiyana didn't mock him. She just breathed beside him, steady and stubborn. When the night finally loosened, Soul guided her along the creek bed, stepping where the snow wouldn't sing. Every few yards, he stopped to listen. Aiyana matched him without question. Town lights glowed faint through trees. The church steeple sat like a pale finger pointing at heaven. They reached the service road behind the church. Soul pulled them into pines and let his breathing settle. He reached inside his coat and drew out the leather-bound ledger and folded papers. He pressed them into Aiyana's hands. If we get separated, he said, you take this to Reverend Jonah. You put it on the altar. You don't hand it to any badge. Aiyana held the book like it could burn. And you? Soul looked toward the road that would soon carry men with righteous faces and dirty intentions. I draw them, Soul said. Keep their eyes on me. Aiyana's voice sharpened. That is dying. Soul met her gaze. That is buying time. She stepped closer, grip tightening on his coat. You promised me, she said. I promised I wouldn't hand you over, Soul answered. I promised you'd see tomorrow. Aiyana swallowed. You're not allowed to throw yourself away just so I can live. Soul didn't have time for confession. Then don't waste what I'm risking, he said. If you get to that altar, make them hear you. Voices rose in the distance. A bell clanged once. Somewhere a man shouted. The hunt was forming. Aiyana's hands trembled around the ledger. For one day, she whispered, you were my husband. Soul's throat tightened. For today, he answered, I'm your shield. He touched the brim of his hat like a vow, then turned toward the dark road with the rifle in his hand and started walking into men he couldn't see yet, praying that faith was still stronger than fear. Behind him, Aiyana moved toward the church with the truth pressed to her chest, snow falling soft as judgment. Saul stood in the street with his left hand raised and his right hand close enough to the rifle to tell the truth without saying it. The men facing him weren't outlaws. That was the worst part. They were shopkeepers with sons, ranch hands with Sunday Bibles, fathers who'd never fired at a person before, except tonight, when a banker and a badge gave them permission. "Put the gun down," the rope man said again, voice cracking. Saul didn't blink. "You don't want to do this," he said. "You'll have to live with it after." Caldwell's smile stayed gentle. "Mr. Carter has a talent for theatrics," he said. "Don't let him bend yours." Reverend Jonah stepped down one stair, Bible held like a shield. "Silas," he said, and the use of Caldwell's first name made the crowd murmur, "This is church ground." Caldwell spread his hands. "Then let the church help the town. We have a dangerous man. We have a frightened woman. We have a duty." Sheriff Kellen's jaw worked. "Reverend, please." Jonah's eyes sharpened. "Please what?" "Please bless a lynching." That word hit the air like a thrown stone. Men shifted. Someone lowered a rifle a fraction. Someone else lifted his higher out of spite. Saul kept his voice even. "You want order, Sheriff? Bring your deputy's body out. Let folks see him. Let Doc Voss look at him. Then we talk." The sheriff's gaze flicked to the bank door. Caldwell didn't move, but his eyes did. Quick, calculating. "There's no need," Caldwell said softly. "The deputy's wife is with him. Poor woman's beside herself." Saul's stomach tightened. He hadn't heard a single sob. Jonah's voice turned hard. "Where is she then?" Caldwell's smile thinned. "Inside. Being cared for." "By who?" Jonah pressed. Caldwell's eyes cooled. "By people who know their place." Sheriff Kellen cleared his throat like he was swallowing nails. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I'm asking you one time. Come with me peacefully. We'll sort this out." "And if I don't?" Saul asked. The rope man's hand tightened. "Then we take you." Saul looked at the rope, then at the faces behind it. "You really want to be the man who ties a black rancher on Christmas morning?" he asked quietly. "You want your boy to ask what you did today?" A few eyes dropped. A few didn't. Caldwell's voice slid in, smooth as whiskey. "Don't let him guilt you. He rode in, stole a woman, and now he's poisoning your minister." Jonah's head snapped toward Caldwell. "Watch your mouth in front of God." Caldwell's smile became a line. "Then bring the woman out, Reverend," he said. "If she's safe, let her speak." Saul's pulse slammed. Caldwell wasn't hunting Saul anymore. He was hunting Aiyana. Inside the church, Aiyana paused behind the last row of pews and listened. The words came through the doors in pieces. Murder, hostage, savage, law. She held the ledger under, her cloak like it was a live coal. A woman in the pew turned and saw her. The woman's mouth fell open. "Please," Aiyana whispered, "don't scream." The woman swallowed hard, stood, and stepped aside. Aiyana moved forward. Halfway down the aisle, another woman rose, tall, plain-dressed, with tired eyes. Ruth Kellen. Ruth stepped into Aiyana's path, not blocking her, just close enough to be a choice. You can't go out there, Ruth breathed. Aiyana's chin lifted. He can't stay out there. Ruth's hands trembled once, then steadied. She slipped her scarf off and wrapped it around Aiyana's shoulders like a blessing. Then don't go alone, she whispered. If God is watching this town today, he'll be watching what I do too. Near the altar, a tall man with a doctor's bag was speaking in a tight voice to Reverend Jonah. Doc Voss. I haven't seen the body, Voss was saying, and I won't sign a damn thing until I do. Jonah's gaze lifted and locked on Aiyana. Surprise flickered, then understanding. Jonah moved toward her. Child, he said softly, what have they done to you? Aiyana swallowed the fear that wanted to own her tongue. They will hang him, she said, and they will call it holy. Voss's jaw tightened. God help us. Aiyana pulled the ledger out from under her cloak. This is why they came, she said. This is why my father died. Jonah's hands hovered but didn't touch it yet. Outside, Caldwell's voice rose again. Reverend, we're waiting. Or do you prefer to protect criminals? Jonah's face hardened. He turned toward the doors. No, he said. I prefer to protect souls. Sheriff Kellen's voice carried, strained. Open the doors, Reverend. Let the men see. Aiyana's throat tightened. Jonah looked at her. Do you want to speak? He asked. Aiyana thought of Clay's torch, of Saul's hand on her wrist in the creek bed, steady in the dark. She nodded once. Yes. Doc Voss stepped forward, voice low. If you walk out there, they might shoot. Aiyana's eyes didn't leave the doors. If I don't, she said, they will hang him. Ruth tightened the scarf at Aiyana's collar. Then stand tall, she murmured. Jonah opened the church doors. Cold struck the sanctuary like punishment. Every head outside turned. Saul saw her before he understood he was seeing her. Aiyana stood in the doorway, red scarf against the gray day, the ledger held to her chest. For 1 second, Saul's hand slackened on the rifle. Terror and relief hit him together, so sharp it stole his breath. A gasp rippled through the crowd. An old woman near the hitching post crossed herself. The rope man took half a step back, like the rope got heavier. Reverend Jonah lifted his free hand. Lord, he said, voice carrying, make room in hearts for truth. Caldwell's smile came back fast, triumphant. There she is, he called. Miss, whatever name he's given you today. Aiyana stepped onto the threshold, with the ledger pressed to her chest. And the town learned what it felt like when the story refused to stay quiet. Saul felt the street tilt when Aiyana stepped into it. Not because she was Apache, because she carried herself like a witness, and witnesses were dangerous in Stillwater. Caldwell took a step forward, smile bright as polished coin. See? He called. She's frightened. She needs saving. Aiyana's voice came out steady. I need truth. Sheriff Kellen's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, are you being held here against your will? Caldwell leaned close, honey over a hook. Tell them he forced you. Tell them he threatened you. Saul didn't move. He let Aiyana own her breath. "He did not force me," she said. "He stood between me and men who meant to drag me away, in the snow, on Christmas morning." A murmur ran through the crowd. Confusion, not mercy. Caldwell's smile twitched. "Trauma," he said quickly. "Do not call me confused," Aiyana snapped. "You say that so you can ignore me." Reverend Jonah stepped down, Bible in hand. "Let her speak." Doc Voss pushed forward, face tight with anger. "And while she speaks, show me Deputy Pike." Caldwell's gaze cooled. "Doctor, this is no—" "It's exactly the time," Voss said. "Dead men don't wait on bankers." Ruth Kellen's voice rose from the edge of the crowd. "Wade, stop letting him steer you." The sheriff's jaw worked. He pointed to the church. "Inside, all of you. God's house. Clear ears." Caldwell started to protest. Jonah cut him off. "In," he said, quiet and final. Boots stomped snow from soles. The crowd poured into the church. Soul entered last. Aiyana walked straight to the front and stopped at the altar rail. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. She set the ledger on the white cloth like she was laying down a heart. Caldwell's voice rang through the pews. "That book is stolen property." "It is my father's blood," Aiyana said. Aiyana faced the people. "My father signed for rations and blankets at Fort Bridger. Promised to our families in exchange for peace." She tapped the ledger. "This shows the promises were lies. Supplies counted twice, delivered once. Money taken by men with clean hands." Caldwell laughed, sharp. "You expect them to believe an Indian girl over their bank?" Aiyana lifted her chin. "I expect them to remember what kind of man calls stolen bread business." Doc Voss stepped forward. "Let me see it." Aiyana pushed the ledger toward him. Voss read fast. His face changed. "These are receipts," he said. "Names, dates, amounts." A man in the third pew rose slowly. "That's my mark," he whispered. "I paid Caldwell's bank for a debt I never understood." Another voice. "Mine too." Aiyana pulled a folded sheet from inside the ledger and held it up. "This is the list," she said. "Men who signed for shipments that never reached the people they were meant for." Caldwell's smile vanished. "Sheriff," he barked, "take that from her." Sheriff Kellen hesitated. Ruth's voice cut like a whip. "Don't you dare!" Caldwell stepped closer, eyes wild now. "You're stirring up a riot." Jonah's voice lifted, carrying. "The truth is not a riot, Silas. It's a reckoning." Caldwell's face flushed. "You don't understand what holds a town together." Soul's voice came out low and steady. "What holds a town together is whether a man can sleep at night without stepping over another man's bones." Heads turned. Caldwell pointed at Saul. "Murderer." Soul met his eyes. "Show the deputy," he said. Caldwell's mouth opened, then closed. Doc Voss looked up from the ledger, eyes cold. "There is no body," he said. "If there was, Silas would have paraded it." A rustle moved through the pews. The rope man's face drained. Sheriff Kellen swallowed hard. "Silas," he said low, Where is Pike? Caldwell's gaze flicked to the side door, and that was the mistake. He turned and ran. Boots slammed on boards. Caldwell shoved through the doorway into bright snow, coat flapping, dignity gone. Saul moved without thinking. He burst after Caldwell, caught him beyond the hitching posts. Caldwell clawed for a pistol under his fine coat. Saul grabbed his wrist and twisted. The gun dropped into the snow with a dull thunk. "Don't," Saul said, breath steaming. "Not today." Caldwell spat. "You think God cares what happens to you?" Saul's grip tightened. "I think he's watching what happens to them." The church doors spilled people into the yard. Jonah, Voss, Ruth, the sheriff. Sheriff Kellen stepped forward, hands shaking as he drew his cuffs. "Silas Caldwell," he said, voice cracking. "You're under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy." Caldwell laughed thin. "You can't." "I can," Kellen whispered. "Because I'm done." The cuffs snapped closed. The sound was small, but it changed the air. No one cheered. They just breathed. On the church steps, the posse men stared at the banker in irons as if waking from a spell. One by one, rifles lowered. A boy no older than 16 crossed himself and whispered an apology he didn't know how to say out loud. Sheriff Kellen looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "We'll need statements," he said to Jonah, to Voss, to anyone brave enough to meet his eyes. "And we'll need protection. Caldwell's partners won't stay quiet. Not after today, anyway." Aiyana came down the steps and stopped beside Saul. She didn't touch him yet. She looked at him like she was verifying he was real. "You could have run," she said. "So could you," Saul answered. Aiyana's eyes shone. "I didn't." Saul swallowed. "Neither did I." Reverend Jonah lifted his Bible into the cold. "This morning a girl begged for a husband just for today," he said. "Today she gave us truth." Ruth stepped closer and took Aiyana's hand, firm. "Come home," she said. Aiyana blinked. "Home." Ruth nodded toward Saul. "Where you're safe." Saul looked at Aiyana, and something in him cracked open. "If you still want," he said quietly, "my door stays open." Aiyana's breath shook. Then she nodded once like a vow. "Today," she whispered. Saul nodded back. "And tomorrow." The snow kept falling for a while after the shouting stopped, as if heaven itself needed a minute to understand what had happened. In the days that followed, the town tried to go back to the way it used to be. Folk swept their porches. Men saddled their horses. The church doors opened on Sunday like nothing had changed. But something had changed. Because once people see the truth laid out plain, it's hard to pretend the old lies still fit. Caldwell's power didn't vanish in one moment. He fought, like men like him always do, through paper, through threats, through backroom friends who smiled and called it business. But for the first time, he didn't have silence on his side. He didn't have a whole town looking away. And Saul stayed. Not because he was fearless, not because he thought he deserved a second chance. He stayed because he'd learned something simple that most folks only learn after they've buried too much. A person can't outride grief forever. Sooner or later, a man has to turn around and face it, or let it hollow him out. Aiyana didn't stop being cautious overnight either. She'd been taught by pain to keep her heart behind her ribs where no one could touch it. But little by little, she stopped flinching when hands reached toward her. Little by little, she started believing that home didn't have to mean a place where someone could claim her. Some evenings, when the wind was soft and the sky was clear, they'd sit where the firelight could reach them. Saul would speak less than he felt, because that was his way. Aiyana would watch him the way a person watches the horizon after a storm, waiting to see if danger returns. And slowly, quietly, trust would grow where fear used to live. Because love in the Old West was never just romance. It was shelter. It was choosing to stand. It was doing the hard thing when the easy thing was to run. And if you've lived long enough to know what it means to lose someone, then you understand why this story matters. Not because it's perfect, not because it's easy, but because it reminds us that God can still put a hand on a broken life and guide it towards something worth holding on to. If this story touched your heart, would you take a moment to like this video? It truly helps more people find these old-fashioned Western tales. And if you enjoy stories about courage, faith, and second chances, please subscribe and stay with us. We'd be honored to have you here. Now tell me something in the comments. What city are you watching from today? And if you feel comfortable, share a little note. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Until next time, may the Lord keep you safe, keep you warm, and remind you that it's never too late to come home.